stand out in the crowd, right? If I'm 1 in 2 million, that doesn't sound super great. Nick has a strong background in both trivia, in that he won $100,000 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and essentially quit his job the next day.
Oh,
The cord cutting aspect and moving away from cable TV has led to like all of these different sort of cable-esque style apps, right?
Mhm.
There's like the Tubies, there's the Slings.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Marketing on Mars. Today we have Sam McLellan. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
All right.
Well,
All right.
yeah.
All right. He is currently the Chief Marketing Officer of Big Brain, which is a Big Brain Games, which is, as you can guess, it is a game. A little bit. We'll dive into it a little bit more. A little bit on Sam's background, though. He started an MMO company in Europe back in college, and that was just kind of was kind of dabbling into the gaming world. Then he worked at YouTube, basically became a mobile gaming expert, working on some projects that grossed over $250 million in revenue. Then he worked at Kabam. For those of you that know, is again a portfolio of mobile games, and then Zynga, and now he has his own company, Big Brain, and chief marketing officer there, doing some very, very cool things. So, Sam, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, as you know, the tradition, we will be starting the show off with some hot sauce. What do you have in front of us today?
So I don't actually have too much of the strong stuff in the house at the moment, but I got this guy. So it's weak knees gochujang sriracha, made by a company here in Brooklyn, New York, and this has quickly become like the thing that I put on
Everything.
pretty much everything. And they just released a like super spicy version of this, so I'm probably gonna be ordering that next. Yeah, it's essentially all I got in the house at the moment.
Cool. I got the same one as last time, Tortuga Gordo. I got to give this guy a shout out. Found this guy in Portland. It's a smoked Carolina Reaper, and it's been killing me. It's been killing me the last 2 months. So let's start off with a dab. Get the show started. Okay.
I just knocked the top off of this. There we go.
Got some. All right. Cheers.
I'm going straight with the finger.
Okay. It never gets easy. You know, this is the 8th or 10th time that I've done this on a podcast. It just never it never gets easy.
Yeah, when it's just straight too. I mean, right off the bat.
Yeah, no breakfast. Really, just good way to lose weight, I guess. Just killing my insides.
Yeah, and waking up too. Who needs coffee?
And waking up. Exactly. So, I mean, I gave a little bit of a background on you, but maybe you can just kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and just, you know, doing marketing and all that while I recover my mouth.
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, like you kind of mentioned, like obviously since college, I've kind of really been into video games. As a kid too, like, you know, kind of started pretty early on. And I always wanted to be involved in that industry. And so after YouTube, I essentially had the opportunity to kind of go into that field right as things like Facebook gaming were really taking off. So I kind of got to ride that wave as things like, I'm sure everyone knows Farmville, but you know, a lot of the other games that kind of came along with that, like Ebony and things like that. And then obviously mobile games, you know, kind of took off at some point as more and more people had phones, like iPhone became more and more popular.
Mm-hmm.
So initially I was on the product side of things, helping design those games, kind of designing mainly the monetization side of things, like when do we run events, you know, what are sales, that kind of thing. And then had an opportunity to switch to the other side with user acquisition, which is pretty similar. You know, both of them are kind of involved with money. One's spending it, one's kind of making it.
Mm-hmm.
But the process is relatively similar. And then had the opportunity to kind of oversee a bunch of those games at Kabam before moving to other industries, you know, or other companies in mobile gaming space like Zynga, Netmarble. And then I ended up moving to New York I got engaged, and it's impossible to get your wife or any New Yorker to leave New York. So I ended up moving here, and it's been, kind of worked at a lot of other different mobile first companies. One was like a company called Fly Cleaners that was like an on-demand laundry company.
Mhm.
Another one called Musician that does sort of music education through an app where it kind of listens along.
Mhm.
And then I had this opportunity to join Big Brain, essentially to kind of really take our product to the next level. So the two founders, Nick and Cam, were the people who started the company, but I'm now basically the one they brought in to kind of to grow it into the next thing, right? Beyond just a product that's kind of floating out there in the app store.
Yeah. So give us a sense of how big Big Brain Games is right now. Do you have any stats that you can share,
So it's
like
pretty.
revenues or number of users or anything like that?
Yeah. So I mean, we're pretty early on in terms of our overall, efforts. I would say. I mean, we had a seed round of 4.5 million. Like we've essentially been building that, basically build off of that, and now we're looking at the point of where, what's the next steps? Looking at our Series A to be able to catapult that, really our marketing initiatives to really get our users up there. At the moment, we're kind of floating around that, like, around 40K, I'd say, in terms of monthly active users, which is, a lot smaller than the games I worked on in the past. But
Mhm.
also, this is where games start, right? Like you have to have this constant growth aspect of it, starting from small and going to those millions of users.
Mhm.
And the revenue side of things, I'm going to have to take the hot shot
Take the shot.
and not go into that yet. Yeah. But, I mean, that's essentially part of it, right? As we begin to get using, oh, I'm about to drip it on the desk.
So that is a new kind of style of our show. We're going to be asking very, very tough questions, right? And every single time you cannot answer a question, you will have to take a shot of hot sauce, which you're lucky you got sriracha today. But
Yeah.
got to get you to try this one of these days. Okay, so revenue numbers, confidential, roughly $5 million raised, 40,000 users. You started not too long ago. How many users were there when you first started versus now? And I guess uh, is it only in the US or have you expanded to other regions as
Yeah.
well?
So we're only live in the US at the moment. And actually, even that, we're live everywhere. But if you want to actually do the real money element to it, which
Yeah.
we haven't really talked too much about yet, but that's only live in the 38 states in which skill based games are essentially legal. So we kind of operate in an area where, like, if you have a pub quiz, for example, that is skill based, right? You go to a bar, you can buy a drink and participate in this trivia game, and you'll get a cash prize at the end of it. It might be to off your tab, or it might be just they give you straight cash. Now we kind of operate within that area where if you can have that in a bar in your area, then you can basically play the app for cash. So a good example would be like Massachusetts doesn't allow any kind of promotions around alcohol or that kind of skill based aspect of it,
Mm.
um, especially in bars, and so they don't have a lot of pub trivia, and it's just not necessarily something that's even like permitted. And so we aren't able to operate there on the real side, cash side of things. But our app is, pretty much all of our trivia tournaments are free to those who want to play for free, and there's no cash element to there, and that's available to everybody. So they can play anywhere in the US. We haven't actually expanded beyond that, but theoretically, we could also open it up to anyone else in these time zones. Our games are all live, so essentially, it's kind of like HQ Trivia, where there's not necessarily a host, but there is like it is actually like live, and you're playing with other groups of people.
Mm.
And so it's kind of like along that line of like if you're within this time zone and it works with you, then you could probably play the app on the free side of things.
So I go to a bar with a group of friends, call it 10 of us, and
Mm-hmm.
there's like, 30 people in the bar. We all download this app called Big Brain Games, like
Yep.
Big Brain Games.
Big Brain Games. Yeah.
So we all download it. How do we all enter in the same room though? You create a room ID and then the bar announces it. Enter 9 5 or whatever. Like, tell us how that whole everything works.
Yeah, so we'll probably end up there. Right now, it's essentially that there's a slate of games from 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Eastern time all the way through to midnight. And each of those is like basically launching every 15 minutes, and there's a specific topic to each of those. So, if you're really into The Office, for example, we have like an Office quiz where that'll run for 15 minutes, and you'll just kind of join that with your friends, and everyone will be in that same tournament along with everyone else who's joined it. So, like for example, yesterday we had a 9 p.m. tournament around football, which had 1,800 people in it, all competing for top prize, basically.
Wow. And what is the top prize usually?
In that tournament, it was I think $1,700, but that's the total prize pool. So that'll get split up between a certain rankings, one first through 25th or whatever, and obviously weighted towards first place getting the majority of that money.
Wow. Where does the price pool come from? Does everyone chip in $2, or what's the how does that work?
Yeah. So it's essentially that our 9 p.m. hour actually is free. So that is essentially just coming from us. But it's based on, the total prize pool is based on the number of people playing. So the more people playing, the bigger the prize pool. The other tournaments, if you want to play for the cash prize, then the buy-in's usually anywhere from like $2 to $5. It really depends on the more aggressive, like our 200s, for example, tend to be a little bit of a higher buy-in because the number of people being paid out is higher. So we want to obviously have it so it's a fun experience. I don't know if you ever played HQ Trivia, but I
No.
did, and winning that was kind of like great. I won like $3.12. Like this is not like the most entertaining or like fun experience once you finally actually win, which is always kind of like hard to do on that app. And then when you finally do it, and you get this kind of like mediocre prize. It's not that great. So we definitely wanted to stay away from that and make it worthwhile. If you're going to earn some money, right, it should be something that you feel good about, or at least be repeatable in a way that it's a little bit at a time, so you feel good if it happens pretty often, or it's a big prize and it only happens every now and again.
So I guess so you got the user side, right? People that are going to bars and coming on and joining this trivia. But on the other side, in terms of the revenue side, is that just basically companies buying ad slots on the game, or like how does that work? How does the revenue work?
No, right now it's all user based. So it's sort of like people give us, they'll make a deposit of up to, up to $100. I think is the initial deposit, and we'll match it up to 100. So people can put $20 in, they'll get $40 to spend on the app, and then they buy in, and then obviously, hopefully, you win more money and you end up, kind of cashing out in the end.
Right. So there's no like ad monetization model there. It's just all from the user.
Not
Right.
yet.
Yeah. Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So tell us what was the go-to market strategy there? And like obviously you raised $5 million. Was that like right off the bat, and you had $5 million to spend, or did you go to market kind of bootstrapped first, built up a certain level, and then raise the money? Tell us that. What was the history like for you guys?
Yeah, so Nick and Cam went and raised that seed round. Essentially, right off the bat, Nick has a strong background in both trivia, in that he won $100,000 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and essentially quit his job the next day.
Oh.
And then, he had a lot of this sort of fantasy sports experience as he was the chief product officer for FanDuel. So it's a lot of this kind of similar sort of not gray area, similar industry that we're kind of in. And he has that kind of background to be able to really get investors' attention because he's got that experience in it. So they took that seed round, formed the company, and built the product. And then when basically at the beginning of this year, I joined the company in March. It was founded in 2020, so it's been around for 2 years already.
Yeah.
And then that was essentially largely the moment of like, how do we really begin to address building this product or growing this user base in the post Apple privacy changes world, right? It's a very different playbook than you would find like 4 years ago, right? Where we kind of all knew how things worked. Apple decided to change that up quite a bit. So now we're at the point where you have to kind of try different things, right? It's like not necessarily as tried and true. So the go to market strategy is a little bit different in that they put it out there just to kind of get organic users and get some data on who was playing what and what are the favorite topics, see how people were using the app so they could then build the next level of that product. Adding different game modes, that kind of thing. And then from my side of things, it's a little bit on the like how now that we have that data and we have that knowledge about what our users really like, we can build that into our ad creative and get out there and just say, there's this product out here on these specific channels that we're running on, like Facebook, TV, that kind of thing, and really like appeal to that user in a way that makes sense, that they'll actually want to play the app and have fun with it.
Yeah. So for the users, the people that are listening right now that are not aware of what has changed in Apple and also Android, the Android store, can you explain a little bit about what life was like before for a mobile game, and now?
Yeah. So, it used to be back in the day, Apple created this thing when they released the iPhone called the IDFA. So it's the identifier for advertiser. The whole point being, if you're an advertiser, you're not going to know the person's name or email address or anything necessarily personally attached to them other than this specific number.
Mm.
So if if we were to show an ad to you, it might be like 2, 3, 4, 8, 7. It's a lot longer, right? It's a pretty long
Mm.
series of numbers,
Mm.
but we wouldn't necessarily know it was you. And so they kind of created that, but it obviously became a little bit problematic as more and more data became available to people, and we were able to connect it a lot more. So that's where you kind of saw things like Cambridge Analytica with Facebook, where essentially people were downloading Facebook data, including that number, and being able to hyper target specific people. Same with like political stuff and all this like disinformation you see. So Apple kind of approached it from a perspective of like no more of that and killed that number. So now if you don't opt into sharing that number, which you have to be prompted for, essentially you can do it on an app by app basis. It just gives us zeros. So we don't actually, everyone gets lumped into 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so we don't necessarily have all that granular information that we used to have unless people opt into it. And it's, more people are opting in than they used to. When it first launched, it was like 12%. Now some apps can get up towards of like 1 in 5, so you got 20% people opting in, but it's still never the majority of people. Like most people don't want to be tracked in that way, which makes sense. It's a little creepy, right?
Yeah.
And Google has a similar thing where it's called Google Android ID, GAID, and it does the exact same thing. It allows you to kind of track these folks and show them ads based on things they've clicked on or whatever. The joke used to be, right, if you visited a website, they're going to advertise to you till the end of time where you're like, great, I looked at like, friend sent me a fancy boat that this billionaire bought, and now they're just showing me ads about buying this boat for like 6 months. Well, part of it is like, if a boat costs you, or if they make 15 million by selling that boat, that's an awful lot of ads they can buy until it becomes not so profitable to do that, right?
Right.
And so it's kind of like they have to, if someone visit our website, we're going to show up for 6 months, and it costs us, I don't know, $30 for that one specific person. That's still, one boat being sold covers that entire cost plus, thousands of other people. So now we have this new system, which is it's called Scan. I forget the exact abbreviation off the top of my head in a moment, but essentially what it does is it aggregates all these users into a single data dump from Apple. So they'll take like a day's worth of knowledge and say, all these users clicked your ads. You got 11 installs from this specific campaign. Actually, it's more than that, but you got like 112 from this specific campaign.
Right.
And so we kind of like safety in numbers, if you will, right? And then for like the most prolific advertisers who are spending a huge amounts of money. I mean, I spent tens of millions of dollars for mobile gaming companies. It's not like we had small budgets for these things. And that's for specific games, right? So the whole portfolio for our company is very large. So they would get like a lot of that data that is now such a large data set that they can't specifically target individuals within that group, which kind of prevents the Cambridge Analytica thing, right? And below a certain threshold, we don't get any information. It's just that you had some installs. That's kind of it.
So it's making it more.
So it's a lot harder to do what we were doing before.
Yeah, so it's making it more difficult and probably more expensive too, right? Because now you got less people to target, or your targeting is not as good, right?
Yeah.
So you're spending more money.
And because there's like a minimum threshold on a lot of this stuff, you find that it used to be about spreading your budget as wide as possible, right? You want to hit as many of these sort of different touch points people come into in the mobile like ecosystem. And now it's a little bit more around the like, well, if I'm only going to be limited on the amount of data I get, and I need to have more installs and more people on this specific campaign in order to get granular data on that, then I'm going to be actually spending on less resource, like less channels, right? It's not Facebook, Google plus like 20 other channels. It's like Facebook, Google, and like 4 other channels, because I just need that enough data coming in to actually be able to see whether my campaign spent well at all. And I still can't see individual users, but I need to know, did they make purchases, or did they start a free trial, or all these kind of things you would find in a lot of different apps. In our case, it's like, did someone make a deposit, or is someone actually participating in our tournaments? And I don't know any of that stuff until we've reached those thresholds, obviously.
So obviously that channel is now more difficult, more expensive.
Yep.
You also mentioned TV ads. Is that a very viable channel for mobile games? I know it's very big for some other apps and other kind of online native websites. What about for gaming? Is that TV ads really popular nowadays?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially for us, but I mean, I think gaming in general is kind of having this moment where as the number of sources you can buy ads on are expanding, right? There's a lot of the cord cutting aspect and moving away from cable TV has led to like all of these different sort of cable-esque style apps, right?
Mhm.
There's like the Tubies, there's the Slings, there's all this kind of stuff where a lot more people are on there and there's a lot more ad real estate to buy. All those thousands of channels that were on cable and
Mhm.
were only in one spot before are now on a whole handful of different apps.
Exactly.
And you can kind of bid independently on all that stuff. On top of that, the AT&T changes we were just talking about basically made it so that there is a increased level of inefficiency in your spend, right? You can't,
Yeah.
if I can't target specific people, then I'm just going to accept that some of the people I'm targeting or seeing my ads are just not going to be interested in my product because that's just kind of the inherent aspect of that now. And if that's the case, then TV used to be kind of like that, and that's why it wasn't like super popular. It also
Mhm.
used to be more expensive, but
Mhm.
like this kind of combined, hey, everything's a little bit more expensive, it's a little bit more inefficient. Actually, make it so that TV is like a pretty viable option. And there's companies that are bringing this sort of programmatic aspect to both these like streaming like apps, but also things like connected TVs, right? Where people's TVs, if you have like a Chrome TV, for example, or Android TV, it often shows a lot of ads when you're at that home screen. Some of those are things that people can click on and download apps from, or the QR codes that people can kind of scan and go
Mhm.
from there. So there's a lot of these kind of different networks or different opportunities and touch points that you can kind of exploit in that way that just were too priced out or weren't available to you before.
Right. And so just to add on to that, it's more, there's a lot more ambiguity around targeting when it comes to TV ads, right? Because you don't know who the other side is. You're just targeting, for example, I don't know, maybe majority of your users are maybe into sports, for example, right? Because they go to sports bars.
Yep.
And so you're just targeting ESPN or, Sports Center or whatever wherever you think most sports watchers or sports fanatics are there, and you kind of just target. Not, you can't really target as granular anymore, right? So that's a
Exactly.
big issue, right, with TV ads.
Yeah, and part of it is also if you can't target as precisely, you're definitely just trying to get people's like emotional play on the ad, right? Like you definitely want people to be interested in your ad, and you have to elicit the things that people really know and really love about your app. And it's less about finding that specific, maybe a smaller audience because you're targeting so specifically before with those with the IDFA.
Mm,
Um, and there was a little bit more of like a very specific message for that group, right?
mm,
But since there's a lot of ambiguity and it's a bit larger group, it's a more of a I don't want to say general message, but it's more of a like there's not as specific a message, right? It has to be a little bit more of you're either touching on all of it, or you're kind of bringing up, hey, this is like in your sports case, right? It's not we're targeting football fans, we're targeting people who love sports, so it has to kind of hit all the different sports.
mhm.
So if you're doing that, TV is better almost because you're just going to have that many people's eyes, or you're kind of treating them the same, right? If everyone's going to see this ad on TV, then kind of social is kind of the same way on Facebook, on Google, where look, a huge group of people seeing this rather than that specific people who like football. And if that's the case, essentially they kind of you can approach it the same way, where you're spending budget on both, but you're kind of taking, I wouldn't say exactly the same approach, but it's somewhat like the same approach of budget goes in and you have to make sure that you're getting those installs and the people who want to play your app.
Yeah. So what are some of the best channels for you guys then when it comes to TV that works for you guys?
For TV, I mean things like Tubi and Sling TV. Like a lot of these ones where like it's we have a very specific audience that plays our app. Like we are very millennial heavy. We actually are female dominant, which is kind of a bit of a difference for us in terms of like people like FanDuel and DraftKings, right, are
Mhm.
extremely male dominant. I think it's like 3% of them are female,
Right.
right? Um, so we're kind of at this advantage of being able to target those specific people, and we know that millennials tend to use those specific apps, and so it performs pretty well for us.
Yeah. Okay, so you got TV ads. You still spend a little bit at the app store level because you just have to be there.
Yep,
What other
you
channels?
have
What other yeah?
to.
What other channels work for you guys? Any kind of social media? TikTok, Google, Snapchat, Facebook,
Yeah,
anything
so we're
else?
spending on Google. Facebook was always been a little bit of on off for us because it's just that level of like we're not spending enough that we really can target on that channel. At least not in the way that we used to be able to, and it's just one of our more expensive channels. Then things like TikTok always tend to do really well for our younger like users. I mean, I think that's probably the replacement, if you will, for Facebook and for a lot of users. Like, and I think it's almost impossible not to spend on Facebook, Google, or TikTok at this point. So you're kind of spending at least on all of those, and then looking at, what's the next thing that works for you. It might be Reddit ads, it might be Twitter, it might be, I guess I would say Snapchat, but I've never seen it work for gaming. There's very specific users on that one.
Yeah, yeah. When you say spend, are you talking about just spending in terms of content creation, or are you talking like organically, or are you talking about paid ads as well?
Both. So I mean, I mean, Big Brain, we do like a thing called Fun Fact. Every day we publish something on all of our socials. It's kind of like a fun fact on random stuff. For example, we did what's the lowest zip code, which is a specific zip code for the IRS here in the US. But I think that tends to be a little bit more. I don't necessarily see that as like acquisition marketing. That's more of like almost like brand and just generally kind of
Yeah,
building something to remind your users that you're there, right? Like, it's a fun fact. It's something that could be in any of our tournaments, so you kind of get a little bit of a leg up if you've been following us. And then, and the rest of it's kind of like a fun retention slash just general brand on the internet. Hey, we're here and we exist and we aren't lost in the app store. I think that's the thing that often goes pretty unsaid, especially by Apple when they're like, "We have this huge app store." It's like, yeah, you do. It's not quite as big as Google's, which is like I think twice as big, but also filled with a lot more less lower quality apps. Um, Apple's, I think, has like 2 million apps, right? And if that's the case, then as a user, where you're trying to find something to play, if you type game into the App Store, you get hit with like hundreds of thousands of ads, or not ads, sorry, hundreds of thousands of apps. In that case, how
right.
do you stand out in the crowd, right? If I'm 1 in 2 million, that doesn't sound super great. But if I'm the one that stands out because I've done all the things right, and you typing my name in, and we're up there in the rankings enough that people actually discover us, then you kind of be in that snowball effect of like becoming one of those apps that people all talk about or all downloading, all playing.
So as I'm hearing you speak, it sounds like really the key to the your GTM, your go to market strategy was really around content and branding, right? Creating was that the main focus? Were there partners that you worked with as well that helped drive the message, um, or like what were the main go to market drivers for you guys?
Yeah, so I think the first thing was just generally want people to know we exist. So that's that is part of that branding and messaging and just generally kind of building what is Big Brain, right? On one hand, it could just be a trivia app, but we're actually a lot more than that. We have a lot, this sort of, you can play for real money aspect, you can play for fun. Like there's a lot of different aspects of it. We have to play that up and let users know, right, that there are these options. Um, the other part of that is the performance marketing aspect, right? Which is, you can put all the messaging out there in the world you want. There's a lot of social pages out there for companies you've never heard of that are
Right.
trying their best just to put their message out there.
Right.
The other part of that is the performance marketing, getting connecting a dollar spent with getting a user to click an ad and click install and then start playing that app. And that's essentially how all of this kind of works in terms of like mobile apps as a business, right? It's all balancing your acquisition costs with the money coming in from your user base or from ads being watched, that kind of thing. So that's the other part of it, right? You have to kind of balance that aspect with putting that branding out there. You just can't spend enough really to put that message out there by brand and alone, in my opinion, without having that performance aspect. Otherwise, you're just spending money and hoping for the best, and
Exactly.
that doesn't necessarily work.
Exactly. And
I wish.
on the other hand, you can't really spend on performance marketing until you've actually have some branding, some content, right? So you say chicken and egg. You gotta create some content, create the right branding and the right messaging, run some performance ads, see how your audience reacts. If it works, keep doing it, double down. If not, you got to go right back to content. It all starts with content and branding, and then you got to try
Yep.
performance marketing again to see if it hits a soft spot for your audience, right?
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is just once people come into your app, right? User acquisition the performance aspect of it tends to end at a certain point, right? There's like we hit this event that's our key target, our KPI, and after
Right.
that, it's kind of like it's on some other team, usually in larger companies,
Right.
to say like, oh, well, at this point, it's kind of a product responsibility, and I don't really have any control over that anymore. Uh, the content in the app will also help those acquisition costs. So if we're not, if we can produce all the content we want on our social page and just say, hey, there's a bunch of
Exactly.
facts cool like that here and you can watch them.
Yeah.
So if they come into the app and it's a total disconnect between what we put on those pages and what's in the app, it's not going to work. Like, it needs to be kind of a fun experience across all of these like moments that people can interact with your product. Um,
Well,
I think we've actually done a really good job on that front
yeah.
on the app. Like, we have over 200,000 trivia questions and topics for people to choose from. So there's a lot for people to find, and I think that's the key aspect, right? Like, in this era of we can't really target as specifically. When people come in and we have a very wide range of topics for people to pick from, and I mean it's pretty wide. Like, we have girl band like tournaments, we have Mean Girls, but on the other end, we just launched like football theme of the week, right? So there's two ends, or not just two ends. There's like a bazillion ends. There's a huge gamut of things that people can like play on our app that are cover pretty much all topics. And so it's at that level of like people get to choose what they want to play, and it's that personalization that they get to opt into rather than a lot of other apps are kind of like it's either take it or leave it. This is what we got. A lot of mobile games are definitely that, right? If you don't like matching three things, Candy Crush is probably not for you. Like, that's at that level of like, I don't like any of this. Yeah, don't, you just delete the app, right? Like, there's nothing more for you here. And I think we're poised to begin moving beyond just like trivia, and we're moving into blocks and a couple other games that we're working on within our own app that allow us to kind of target that stuff. But even just by trivia alone, such a wide gamut. As long as you like trivia, which I guess is the sort of matching three element to it, then there's probably something for you within Big Brain. And it's kind of nice to be able to offer that, and also makes easy in reverse our content calendars for things like Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, where we do these fun facts. It's that much easier for us to produce that content because we have that much already for the app. So it's kind of nice to take one and put it in the other, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think the perfect match, or you got the marketing piece, and then you got the product piece, and when you got a perfect synergy between the two, that's usually when you see some pretty good magic happens. And luckily for you, you get to kind of orchestrate that and get both the teams working together. So that's a very cool position to be in, and it sounds like you guys are doing a great job. So um so as we're going forward, what is there to look forward to with Big Brain? Like, what are the next milestones in the next 6 to 12 months? What should we be looking forward to? New releases, or potentially new areas that you want to target?
Yeah. So we have a new game coming out either next week or the week after, but it's called Blocks. It's essentially, think of it as like a word search, but with a timing element. So certain blocks, essentially like a Scrabble board almost, but then like blocks are falling at a certain interval, and you have to kind of make words and get the highest score you possibly can. Folks who really love Wordle, for example, are really into the game.
Oh yeah.
Which is just a few people. The other side of that is we're about to launch live trivia. So if you have played HQ Trivia, where they had a live host and they're kind of calling things out, like, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. Like there was I forget his name off the top of my head, unfortunately, but he was kind of the face of HQ Trivia, right? He was the host every night for those games, and there was a nice element of like kind of logging in. He was calling out specific users who were doing well. It was like a very cool experience, almost like kind of being involved with Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune or Price is Right, that kind of stuff, where there's a huge like audience element. So we're launching that in October. And at what point we don't necessarily know yet because it's still being built. So there's always kind of that opportunity for like a huge roadblock to come down. But that's the goal is essentially to start hosting our actual trivia tournaments. Especially like our 9 o'clock hour, which is the on theme stuff. So at the moment, it's all football themed because football's kicking off this week. So you could have like a host come in and basically who was an ex-retired football player could be hosting it and kind of calling folks out and kind of encouraging people or providing extra knowledge that we didn't have in the quiz, for example.
Awesome.
And I think in this era of influencers and everyone watching some sort of streaming, there's Twitch, there's YouTube. Yeah. There's a bazillion places you can watch a lot of this content, and they have a lot of hosts and a lot of different people. I think it's a huge opportunity where we can kind of have people come in and, hey, we're doing a Twitch trivia, for example, like tournament. We can have different Twitchers or Twitch streamers come in and Twitchers. Yeah, I've heard them called that before. I'm not a big fan. They have Twitch streamers basically come in and just generally host the trivia. It might even be about them, which would be kind of crazy, right? If you have Ninja come in and say, I'm going to host my own Ninja tournament, that's pretty crazy. And it's kind of cool because they get to say, you guys know more about me than I thought you guys knew, which could also be a little creepy. But,
Awesome.
that's the cost of living your life on the internet, I suppose.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining. And sounds like you guys are doing some pretty cool things at Big Brain. Excited to get you on for round 2 when you bring on a hotter hot sauce. We can talk a little bit more about.
There you go.
Maybe from 40,000 users.
Wasn't prepared.
Yeah, I just told you right when you got on screen. So next time we'll get a hotter hot sauce, and excited to hear about some other big milestones that you guys achieve in the future.
Perfect. Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you. Cheers.